Welcome to Health Law Talk, presented by Shahardy Sherman Williams. Health law broken down through expert discussion, real client issues, and real-life experiences. Breaking barriers to understanding complex healthcare issues is our job.
So good morning or good afternoon, whenever you're listening to this. Conrad Meyer here on another edition of Health Law Talk. Rory, Bellina in the office.
How's it going?
Studio here. Today, we're going to be pulling back the curtain on healthcare fraud and diving into some recent groundbreaking cases that could reshape the landscape for healthcare providers nationwide. So, Rory, imagine this, okay? Your doctor bills Medicare for services never performed. Hospitals, fake patient records. Companies are lavishly rewarding physicians with trips and luxury perks. We're going to go over some court cases today and court decisions today that are going to tighten the noose on healthcare fraud. We have a list here of this is just cases in the last year. And so what I guess makes me I'm just shocked is that for as long as you and I have been practicing, I just can't believe this stuff still goes on.
Yeah, it's still out there. We always get the emails and the notices about the exciting ones with the big recoveries for the government, but I'm sure there's 100 other ones that are much smaller amounts that are going on that never get on their radar. But yeah, I think it goes on intentionally or not every day at different places, and we get to see the big ones.
So let's just dive right in because I think it's really interesting. So we have about 9 or 10 cases here that I've kind of pulled just for this like sort of a special edition. What's going on in fraud and abuse litigation across the country? And the first one, I was shocked to read this. This is a case that's United States XRL Zavarov versus the Florida Medical Associates. Now this is a published case. And in this case, the relator is a guy named, or maybe it's a woman, Clarissa Zavarov, looks like,
Yep.
who filed a False Claims Act against her employer, which was the Florida Medical Associates, alleging fraudulent misrepresentations to Medicare, and specifically focused on claims that the defendant here misrepresented patient conditions to secure increased Medicare. So like upcoding.
Upcoding it, yep.
Upcoding, right? And initially, so the government chooses not to intervene. Okay, which is important. So for you listeners out there, when you file a qui tam relator case, you have to first file it under seal and present it to the Department of Justice and the AUSA in your whatever federal court area you're in, and you have to entice them to want to get in. You have to give them the evidence to see if they want to intervene. And usually what happens is if they intervene, the government takes the case and you kind of sit back for the ride.
Or sometimes they'll say, no, you proceed if you want at your cost or peril, and we could jump in at any time.
That's true too.
Which it looks like that might have happened here.
Right. And so the benefit or the detriment is that the benefit is if the government takes it, no cost to you, government picks up the cost. If the government doesn't intervene, you're going on your own dime, but you get a larger piece of the reward should there be an award.
Right.
Okay, so this time it looks like in this case, and I'm probably not saying it right, Zafarov.
Sounds close enough.
Zafarov, that they did not intervene. Okay. However, they entered the case later to address constitutional challenges brought by the Florida Medical Associates against the FCA's qui tam provision itself. So this is really interesting because the court ruled in this particular case. The issue was brought out was whether or not the False Claims Act qui tam provision violated the Appointments Clause of Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution.
I have never
seen this. Right. This is a first for me. So this is a case of first impression, of course. And the court concluded that the FCA qui tam relator acts as an, open quote, officer of the United States, close quote, exercising significant executive authority because they litigate on behalf of the government. So consequently, according to this court, which I'm kind of seeing where this goes, that the relators must be appointed in accordance with the Appointments Clause, and because Zafarov was not properly appointed under Article 2, but rather acted as a self-appointed, the court ruled it violated the constitutional provisions. And the remedy was to dismiss the qui tam entirely.
So what does that mean for every other case?
That's the ripple. I don't know.
So
this has got to go all the way up. Because, I mean, think about this. It defeats the purposes of relator.
Right.
Like, I mean, the whole purpose of the relator and to be able to accomplish what you're going to get, you have to worry about publishing things so that you know, you're first to file.
Right.
You are not putting things in the public domain so the government can't come back and say, oh, you're not going to get your relator fee because, you know, this is, you know, released to the public domain. So if you have to be appointed, well, one, who does the appointment? That's what I want to know. Who actually makes the appointment if we have to do this? And number two, doesn't that defeat the relator
So
purpose?
you would never have a relator then?
Ever. I mean, I guess I would like to delve more into the reasoning behind this. I mean, I know we didn't get too deep into the weeds.
Right. But this could affect like all relators
everywhere
going forward now.
Everywhere.
Because now every relator has to be appointed.
I guess that's what their court's
saying. And how long
is
what's the process for being appointed, and how long does that take?
I don't know. And who does it? I mean, that's just
I'm curious,
isn't that crazy?
I'm curious. I mean, like you said, this has to be challenged. And is this limited to just this federal jurisdiction that this fell under, presumably in Florida? Because I can't see all courts following this, even if it's a federal court. But I can't see other courts across the United States following
the circuits, even So even if there's a split in the circuit, I mean, I'm sure it has to go all the way up to the Supremes,
right?
But to SCOTUS, and I just
so why would okay? Here's a question for you: why do you think the government took this position? If the government, or let's say the OIG,
well, it wasn't the government didn't take this position; the defendant did. So
the defendant,
Florida Medical says, well, no, Zavarov, you can't proceed under the qui tam action because you were not appointed under Article 2 of the Constitution.
And we don't have the full case in front of us, but I want to know, the government chose not to intervene. However, it later entered the case solely to address constitutional challenges. I'm curious what the government's position was when they intervened on this.
That would be interesting to know, but then again, to me, what this does, it sounds like to me, this shuts down relators.
Absolutely. At least until this goes all the way up. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Okay.
Well, look, so that's one of the 10 cases. The next one, United States versus Scienter Health. Okay, so here we have another qui tam. This is relators were Kim Hartman, Anna Bass, Deborah Woody, accused Scienter Health, a psychiatric care provider, of committing multiple fraudulent schemes to defraud Medicare and Medicaid. Those schemes included falsifying patient records, billing for unprovided or excessively billed services, and intentionally misclassifying juvenile and adult patients to exploit higher reimbursement rates.
Right.
One of the more particular serious allegations described the falsification of mandatory 15-minute patient observation records at acute psych units, reportedly resulting in harm to patient safety and financial fraud. So, again,
your standard False Claims Act.
Standard False Claims Act seems pretty standard for falsifying records, billing, upcoding, medical necessity, the whole bit. And I like the ops thing because, I mean, imagine that you can bill on a time-based bill to get more from that. So if they weren't accurately doing that or falsifying time-based records, that's a problem.
So the court here jumped in and they partially granted and partially denied the motion to dismiss. The takeaway here is that it found that most claims insufficiently detailed or lacked materiality under the Rule 9b's stringent pleading standard for fraud. Specifically, it was too broad of falsifications of the records, and the FCA requires precise detail about the fraudulent actions. So what does that mean for other possible whistleblowers, relators in cases? If they think that there's wrongdoing in the system that they're currently working in, it's not enough to just say, here's what's going on. Do you need records? I mean, what is the government saying here?
So that's a good question because I think,
and we get this question a lot when people come to us,
from relators,
or potential relators, potential clients that come to us and say, "Hey, do I have a case per se?"
And the answer is what do the records show? Because it's not going to come from your self-serving testimony,
right?
So, you almost have to, I feel like they almost have to be like a James Bond style insurgent to get records to prove the case.
Yep.
And then is it really worth, is the juice worth the squeeze?
Right.
Like, in other words, I mean, how deep does the rabbit hole go? And again, if they get caught doing this,
Sure.
then is it a crime on them? Like,
Sure.
in other words, internally, are they going to, I mean, I don't know.
That's usually the biggest rub for relators that want to be whistleblowers, is that for them to now meet this court's requirements to get precise details about the fraudulent actions, that means they need to be copying documents, scanning documents, printing records, all while they're probably still employed.
Well, one of the things is, and my thing is, they ask us, for example, in healthcare, can we print patient records?
Mm-hmm.
Is that some HIPAA violation? Or,
and you're not falling under, well,
Well,
I guess we could have that discussion. There are exceptions
the
to HIPAA.
TPO exception. I
Yeah.
mean, treatment payment operations. I mean,
But
would this be considered?
you building your whistleblower case, is that an exception to HIPAA, where you're printing off records that have been changed when the office administrator's gone for the day, because you're building this case at home?
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, I've known about the 60-day overpayment rule.
Right.
I mean, we're all familiar with that. We hear about that a lot. But is there an affirmative duty if you knew or know or have reason to believe that someone is, improperly billing the government for services that maybe are rendered or not rendered or whatever?
Sure.
I mean-
but that okay, but with that we're getting sidetracked. But I think this is
Yeah.
an important topic, is that where do you tie that into confidentiality, HIPAA requirements? You most likely have some sort of non-disclosure, non-disparagement, confidentiality agreement with your practice. I mean, you are skating this fine line between.
I think you can
I'm building
redact the patient name but leave the record in place, right?
Yeah.
And use that when you file it, because you're filing it under seal anyway.
What's interesting is that these two cases that we've just gone on, my takeaway is that it's making it harder for the relators.
Oh, I
And the
agree.
government wants these cases to come forward because they always brag about how much money they've recovered and
Yes.
how effective their agents are. But now you're telling someone who went to them that had, probably valid concerns about this practice on how they were billing. Now you're saying, yeah, thanks,
Wasn't good
but
enough.
it wasn't good enough, and we're going to throw out your case.
Well,
now you've probably been
okay.
fired. Your reputation's tarnished. You're never going to work in this city again because everyone thinks you're a whistleblower.
So of the three key TAMs that I've filed, and I can tell you right now, one we settled, and the government did intervene,
Okay.
and ultimately came up with a settlement. And the other two, the government did not intervene, and then the relators decided they did not want to move forward.
Okay.
So, but it was interesting. The one that the government did intervene, it was weird. I mean, not weird. It was, you almost need to. I mean, you have to give it to the government on a silver platter.
The smoking gun.
Oh,
You
I mean,
need it.
you have got to give them on a silver platter because
They're not interested
they're
in
not.
investigating.
Oh no! I mean, and it makes me wonder. Like, I mean, how? What do you mean you need to have it on a silver? You're telling me that if we can't provide you X, you're not
Right.
even interested in trying to look into this?
And that's what this case says.
That's exactly what it says.
That's what this case is saying.
I mean, in my case, in the one that the government did intervene, but I thought really wasn't aggressively pursuing it. They did not. I mean, we had patients that, because of the schemes, that patients were being put in harm's way and dying.
Mm-hmm.
And I even told the DOJ attorney at the time, I said, so what else needs to happen? How many more patients need to actually die? And they were very nonchalant about it. It was weird. I just, I mean, that would be like me coming to you as a private attorney and saying, look, I'd like you to look into something, and can you maybe do a deal for me? And you tell me, oh, well, that's okay. You need to bring me all the deal documents.
Right.
You need to give me all the terms. You need to have the contracts laid out. You need to have the due diligence done. And at the very end, if you give me all of that, then I can do the deal.
Right.
Like, you would never have any business.
No.
All right, so let's look at the third one we have. This is interesting. Grant on behalf of the United States versus Zorn.
Okay.
Okay, so I should have printed the jurisdiction of these, and I didn't do that.
This one,
so,
it looks like Iowa, but that's okay.
yeah, so I should have got that. But anyway, you can look all these up online. These are all published cases. So here we got a relator, Stephen Grant, files a key tam against Stephen Zorn, the Iowa Sleep Disorder Center and Iowa CPAP LLC.
So similar claims, overbilling for patient visits,
And
referral
these sleep
schemes.
things, I'll tell you, these sleep centers, I mean, to me, like, they're just
Oh, yeah.
rife with
Yes.
this stuff.
So we've got AKS and Stark allegations here.
Which is interesting because most of the time it's AKS. You know,
Right.
you rarely see an FCA with a Stark issue.
No, you're right. You're right. Because, I mean, you're right. Retaliatory termination after reporting these practices. Okay, so government does not intervene here. Trial proceeds.
Right.
District court finds FCA violations, impose
Treble
treble
damages.
damages,
There we
and
go.
punitive penalties. So it goes up on appeal, and then the court found insufficient evidence directly connecting these violations to the claims submitted. So again, this relator makes it past the district court level, has
A full-blown trial.
treble damages, punitive penalties. Then we go on appeal, and it's overturned because we don't have enough sufficient details to substantiate these claims.
So then it's interesting.
And then it gets worse for him too.
Right,
It's
because
like,
the treble damages. You see that?
That's gone, and
gone.
then-
But wait, that's interesting because we've always heard treble damages on FCA, right? I mean, we talk about
Always.
CMP, FCA, treble damages.
and whenever I go to CLEs, especially the
Oh,
national CLEs, the
yeah.
agents love to talk about their treble damages because that's their weight. That's what they scare you with, because it's not
Right.
it's not always the overpayment that you received or the legal payment. It's that treble damages of if we paid you $100 over, you return the $100 plus another $300.
But look what it said here in Zorn. It said
Yep.
that the court emphasized that the punitive financial sanctions under FCA must be proportionate to the actual harm and statutory objectives.
So
Basically,
then there is no treble damages.
Right,
then,
so they
because
just capped it.
Treble damages is just an arbitrary amount that the government put into place.
so
So they found that treble damages were violated. Again, we're getting back to constitutional law. Violated the Eighth Amendment's excessive fines clause.
I just like, wow.
So these courts are knocking down,
gutting FCA.
gutting FCA. This poor relator, he also lost his punitive damages due to lack of sufficient malice. So it goes through a full-blown trial. He's awarded punitive damages, and then on appeal, it's knocked down.
And to me, I think that's interesting because normally on appeal, right, once a fact finder, be it a judge or a jury, makes a determination, the law is clear. You don't want to disrupt that.
Correct.
You wanna
don't
leave-
you don't want to
absent-
disturb the jury.
Right, absent or judge. I mean,
Right.
absent error because that judge sat through the trial.
Correct. You're reading a record.
Right.
Yep.
Right. I mean, that judge looking at facial expressions, making credibility determinations. So, I mean,
So the first three cases have
not been.
cut the Achilles of FCA so far.
So let's go to this one because the fourth case is something you and I
The
have heard.
COVID case?
Yes, the
I
COVID.
love COVID cases.
Okay, so this is United States versus how do you say that? Elfenbein?
Elfbein?
Is it like a Lord of the
Elfbein?
Rings?
I don't know.
It's Elfenbein.
Elfenbein.
Okay.
Elfenbein.
So this is Dr. Ron Elfenbein. He operated a drive-through COVID-19 testing site during the pandemic and was indicted for allegedly submitting fraudulent billing claims to Medicare. Boy, does this sound
Oh,
familiar.
man. He must have submitted a lot of claims.
I bet
if
you
it was
he
a
did.
Drive-through.
I mean, like a Wendy's for COVID.
You just roll down your window, tilt your head back, get a swab, and we'll call you with the results. He
Right.
must have been
Cashing in.
I'm
Let's
curious
see.
where this
government
was.
argued that Elfenbein improperly billed high-level E&M codes. I mean, God, for those who don't know, they have 5 levels of
Yeah.
E&M. So you have 5 levels of E&M, and so how in the world do you bill like a level 4 or a level 5? Despite providing a drive-through service, right, where you're literally pulling up, nose swab, and you drive off. The prosecution claimed these billings were knowingly inflated to greater reimbursements, and the defense maintained that Elfenbein followed telehealth guidelines during the time evolving coding standards, blah, blah, blah. So what happened?
So he asserted a good faith belief that his billing conformed to CMS directives. So he was convicted. Then he files motion for acquittal and motion for new trial, another reversal, finding that the government failed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that his interpretation of the rules was unreasonable. So, again, we've got an appellate court overturning the district court in this case. The judge emphasized that medical billing codes are highly technical, agreed, and not readily interpretable by lay jurors. So this goes back to what you were just saying. So a full-blown trial, I'm sure both sides had billing experts that explain what these codes meant, what the guidance was for these different E&M codes, but the appellate court finds that was not clear enough.
So interestingly, the court notes that The judge emphasized that medical billing codes are highly technical and not readily interpretable by lay jurors without expert testimony. I agree with that.
Was there no expert testimony in this case?
But that the government's expert failed to persuasively explain why the coding changes or choices were false and unreasonable, and the auditors were not qualified
to interpret nuanced clinical so maybe at the trial level they didn't have the best experts to do it, and it got overturned. But so now we are 4 for 4 on
4. So make sure when
relators
you
getting knocked down.
Make sure the people are qualified. Okay.
Yeah.
You want to take the next one?
All right. Let's look at this next one. So
Stop Illinois Healthcare Fraud LLC versus Said.
So this is an entity that goes after these cases. Now, you want to talk about this, Conrad? Because I know that there are while I prep on this, there are firms that focus solely on going after these whistleblower cases, and I'm curious, is that
okay? So this is a key tam targeting Asif Said and his in-home healthcare company or companies, accusing them of orchestrating illegal referral arrangements for nonprofits or with a nonprofit that manage state home-based services for seniors. Again, I think senior citizens are the most targeted folks here. Obviously, I think they're Medicare patients, but Said's companies allegedly paid monthly fees to the nonprofit in exchange for preferential patient referrals. So they
paying for referrals.
Paying for referrals. The government alleged violations of AKS, FCA.
Yep.
Basically, you can't pay for referrals.
All right, this one got upheld. 7th Circuit upheld that he knowingly and willfully violated AKS. So again, for people that are know or don't know, AKS is not strict liability like the Stark is. AKS, you have to. There's a intent-based factor.
Yes.
So the 7th Circuit found that it was knowingly and willfully violated AKS by offering inducements for referrals. They rejected Said's arguments that the payments fell within a safe harbor, noting that the intent was to obtain referrals. The court found
intent-based.
Yep. The court found that the district court failed to distinguish between referrals resulting from the conduct and those arising from lawful processes.
Okay. This goes back to black letter law. You don't pay for referrals.
Don't pay for referrals.
Or don't have a scheme outside, some sort of scheme or indirect compensation for referrals.
All right.
So let's go to the next one. Here we go. U.S. for Butler versus Shikara. Relators allege that Dr. Lazine Shikara and his companies operated a field marketing organization that funneled Medicare patients to specific Medicare Advantage organizations in exchange for per enrollment commissions. So another commission-based referral.
Have you heard of a field marketing organization, an FMO?
Have you heard of that?
No, I've never heard of an FMO.
I feel like we're getting, there's a lot of acronyms in healthcare. I'm
going to start using that, an FMO. Well, maybe I won't because this didn't turn out well for Dr. Shakira. But
the Medicare Advantage organizations, or MAOs, in turn, reimburse Shakira's services at favorable capitation rates. Okay. So the relators further allege that the companies transferred high-cost patients to avoid losses by cherry-picking profitable patients and steering those away. Likely required.
So they went through the patients, and if you really needed care, you weren't going to get it because that would cost the clinic to provide that care. So they went for the people that maybe didn't need as much.
Why? You know why? Because the Medicare Advantage gets they defer the Medicare beneficiaries payment to the organization.
Yes.
So basically, if I cherry pick the patients that don't need health care, I'm losing no money.
Yep.
So basically, he looks like he got a windfall from cherry picking the patients that were not sick, and he also got a windfall from paying for referrals to funnel these patients to his MAO. Wow. All right, so let's see what happened here. So the court rejects the constitutional challenge to the FCA, affirming the validity of the key TAM mechanism. Okay, look at that. So I guess that's the thing now.
Yep.
I guess that's the thing.
So all these courts, you know what we're going to do? The next time we have this podcast, we need to have the computer up so we can pull up these for the jurisdiction.
Yeah, so we can look
on
at
the screen and look at this, because I'm curious.
Especially when we go to live streaming. I mean, we're doing video. So I like that.
But I want to pull these up to see where these are physically located, because this court rejected constitutional challenges. So the first one that we talked about, the first two were successful on constitutional challenges. This one not.
Yeah, the first one, the appointments clause. This one seems to give the FCA, the relator, what it deserved, and it looks like they held the relators had sufficiently alleged false claims, and under FCA by certain kickbacks directly influenced reimbursements, which here they did. They cherry-picked. And the marketing payments were found to plausibly violate AKS. So they thus, again, fruit from the poisonous tree. If you funnel these payments for referrals, then all of the subsequent claims from those illegal referrals are all suspect and false as well. And it demonstrates how referral-based can trigger. Yes, I see that. So, interesting case under that.
All right. What we got here. So you got a few more.
We got a few. We got plenty of time. We got some time. I think we got 2 more or 3 more. And I like this. I like this whole idea of doing fraud and abuse wrap-ups for current cases, because you know what? Even though we go to these, high-level fraud and abuse meetings, I don't know how. I mean, I know they get the hot button cases,
right?
But I've never seen cases like these.
No.
I mean,
these 2 constitutional cases are really interesting.
It's interesting. So let's see.
United States, XRL, another name, Feinsenmeyer.
Feinsenmeyer versus what? Cameron
Island Group.
Okay.
All right. So Kip
yeah.
alleged that Precision Lens and its late founder engaged in massive kickback scheme targeting ophthalmologists. Luxury trips, private flights, expensive entertainment to influence purchasing decisions, which led those physicians to submit claims.
Medicare claims, right?
Medicare claims for procedures involving Precision Lens products. The government intervenes here.
Wow.
Claiming the gifts violated AKS, and the claims were then false.
This is interesting.
Jury verdict.
Wow, $43 million award.
The court ruled that
later trebled.
Yep.
Look at that.
Yep. The luxury benefits constituted unlawful remuneration. The court upheld the finding that they knowingly submitted claims that were tainted by the kickbacks. So we have causation and materiality requirement under FCA, which was met. However, the court knocked down the judgment from nearly $500 million, so the 43 plus a 3 treble, from $500 million to approximately $216 Eighth Amendment excessive fines clause. So that one came into play again. So is treble damages going away?
Well, I think the problem is they do it per claim, right?
Right.
And you know this, and I know this, maybe our listeners don't, but you're talking about, in some cases, hundreds of claims a day.
And each claim is $1,000.
And each claim could be $1,000 or more, depending on the claim. So you're talking about a massive amount of treble damages. But it looks like here they reduced it to $216 million, and basically, again,
so treble damages is still there as a backstop, unless the court says it's too much.
But even still, I'm trying to even get more basic than that. Like, in this day and age, with all of the press and all of the litigation, you're still in the sunshine laws, for example. You're telling me that you're going to funnel doctors on massive vacations and trips and luxury things. Why? Like, do you really want to put a target on your back? I don't get it. I don't get it. Maybe they think they're impenetrable.
They think that they're not going to catch the government on the radar. I don't know.
All right, so let's hit the next one. So, United States XRL Miller versus Reckitt Benckiser Group PLC. All right, Rebecca Miller brings a multi-state qui tam against Reckitt Benckiser, a pharmaceutical company and maker of Suboxone.
Okay.
Here we go. She alleges the company manipulated price data to avoid reporting the true, quote, best price, close quote, to CMS.
Which would reduces the reimbursements of their Medicaid.
Yeah. The scheme allegedly include providing discounts through controlled subsidiaries to avoid triggering lower price obligations. And the relator also alleged violation of AKS tied to, inappropriate rebates and provider incentives. So let's see. Court dismissed claims against the UK-based parent company due to lack of personal jurisdiction and service defects. However, the court did allow FCA claims against, looks like Reckitt. And what happened here? So it held that the relator had adequately pled that they misreported best price data, coordinated with others in a conspiracy to defraud the Medicaid drug rebate program. And they were also allowed to proceed on illegal remuneration schemes. Okay, so there we go. So it basically, the takeaway from this is pharmaceutical companies are not immune from this. So, and we know that. We've seen a lot of FCA claims and pharmacy stuff. So I have, and I've seen that inappropriate switching at other, and they had one here. That was in Louisiana for the, involves some hospital pharmacy. Their what you call it? What's the pharmacy? Their the drugs they push. It's their panel, pharmacy panel.
Yep.
They were auto switching certain drugs, certain medications in order to get best price.
Yep.
It was interesting. Okay. All right. You want to take the next one?
Sure. United States XRL Wheeler versus Acadia Healthcare Company. Oh, this one.
Is this one here?
I don't know. Acadia. That's why we need the monitor in here so we could look these up. Lisa Wheeler alleged that Acadia Healthcare and its affiliates submitted false claims to Medicaid and other programs by fabricating documentation for groups therapy sessions that never occurred, claiming employees created false patient notes and submitted those for compliance documentation. So this one, I believe they might have been under a CIA integrity agreement, which supported the reimbursement. Here it is: alleged violations of the corporate integrity agreement with HHS. So they were already under investigation for an
and they did it again.
And she agreement and
shame one, shame on right. I mean, really,
False Claims Act. So Fourth Circuit. Okay. Fourth Circuit reversed the district court's dismissal and found that she sufficiently alleged all the required elements of FCA liability. The court upheld that the creation of the documentation was both material to reimbursement and submitted. And the panel also recognized, the Fourth Circuit panel also recognized for the first time that stipulated penalties under a CIA could constitute a financial obligation under reverse false claims provision. That's interesting. So they were already under the CIA and continued the actions.
Are you kidding? Wow. I mean, like, how? Like, you're already being watched.
Right. You have to submit all these reports. I've worked on numerous CIA matters, and they're not fun. It's a lot of work, a lot of administrative work, and you have to submit these reports into an outside firm. The outside firm has to then submit them to the government, and you're still doing it.
So what's the takeaway from, we look at all these cases, Rory, what is the takeaway here?
Well, I think, the big things that I'm seeing is that if I'm defense counsel for any of these practices, I'm brushing up on constitutional law because that was really interesting. That's my takeaway from these two things is that the excessive fines clause is very interesting because even if you're guilty per se and you did submit these and you get hit with treble damages, you could save your client some money. So I'm really looking at that closely. Right. The other big takeaway is kind of like you said, that the government with its vast amount of resources and personnel, unless your case is teed up on a silver platter with documentation, you might not get there. You can't just call the OIG and say, hey, I think this practice down the street is doing this.
And you better have the right experts.
You better have the right experts, all the documentation, and really have an airtight case.
Now, on the flip side, if I'm relator counsel, I'm thinking of the same thing. I better have specificity. I better have materiality. I better have details. I better have the supporting evidence.
It's not enough to just call in your client as the practice manager and say, here's what was going on. You need documents and
then you got to tell those relators too that, look, if the government intervenes, you need to be prepared if you want to move forward to fund that case, or at least fund the cost of those cases.
Right.
So and they're not cheap.
No, and I think briefly, Conrad, for your three, if you want to just tell our listeners, what's the recovery look like for the relators?
So you're looking at, I want to say, up to 20% if they intervene, but you never get 20%.
No,
you never get it. I mean, that's what the law says, but you never get it. You're lucky. I mean, you have to be over the top to get 15%. Mm-hmm. So you're looking at an average of 10%, I believe, on an intervention claim. When you don't intervene, and I forget this, I should know this off the top of my head, but I don't. I forgot the percentage of what it is when they don't intervene and you pursue anyway. I know it's higher. I want to say it's a third, but I'm not 100% sure.
I think it is a third, but you are then having to hire counsel that maybe is taking this on contingency, but you're going to have all these costs associated. So that counsel is really going to want to make sure that the case is rock solid.
Absolutely.
And the relator has to be comfortable with your name's going to be in the paper. It's going to be on all these national websites.
Yes, they are.
Is your reputation, although you did nothing wrong and you're doing the right thing by bringing this to the government's attention, are you going to be the black sheep now and never get hired anywhere in the healthcare field?
I don't know if that would never get hired, because I've seen people get hired that have been relators. I mean, they're still in healthcare, so I don't know if you're black, but and that could go both ways, because you might have some people that say, look, hey, I like someone who wants to keep an eye on everything. Point. So I don't know if they're really blackballed, because to me, I think weeding out bad actors, especially in healthcare,
sure.
I think most healthcare administrators would say, we don't want to run the foul of that.
That's true.
They want to walk the line.
But if you're a practice that you think is very close to the line, you're not going to want to bring in this relator.
That person. Right. You're right. So, hey, if you want to walk that line, get ready to get bit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
be prepared for it.
We're going to do this again, and I think we're going to come up with some more cases. I like this sort of an annual fraud and abuse thing. We should create our own. This would be an annual type thing.
This is a good one, and I want to do one. We talk so much about AKS. Something that's not talked about a lot because it just doesn't come up as much as it used to is Stark. I'd love to do one that's focused on Stark, because that's a completely different strict liability, no intent requirement. But I'd love to look at some of these Stark cases.
And we get a lot of questions that a lot of times from doctors. We do. So I think, and I think that would be a good thing to do. Right?
Because all these besides one were AKS.
We got to make it a little. We got to make it. We can't make it dry. The problem is when you go into these regs and you listen to this
Stark's
stuff,
boring.
It is dry.
Yes.
And I tell the law students that all the time, like, guys, it's going to be dry. Yep. So I try to make hypothets fun but real.
Yep.
Right. And so that they have interest. So we could absolutely do that. I think that'd be fun.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Well, look, everyone, thank you for joining us for another episode of Health Law Talk. Again, rate us, give us that good rating. Email us if you have any questions. If you want us to do a certain topic that you like, send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you much. Have a great day. Enjoy the week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Health Law Talk, presented by Shahardy Sherman Williams. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel, make sure to give us that 5-star rating, and share with your friends. Shahardy Sherman Williams is providing this podcast as a public service. This podcast is for educational purposes only. This podcast does not constitute legal advice, nor does this podcast establish an attorney-client relationship. Reference to any specific product or entity does not count as an endorsement or recommendation by Shahardy Sherman Williams. The views expressed by guests on the show are their own, and their appearance does not imply an endorsement of them or their entity that they represent. Remember, please consult an attorney for your specific legal issues.